Hey everyone, welcome to Comedicine. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Boston, and we have a super fun episode today. We are talking mostly about aging studies and how to live longer, how to live better. But we're talking to Matt McAlister. He is a PhD student in biomedical science. He studies aging and longevity, specifically epigenetics. He's super smart, you guys. He also was a longtime improv performer. He studied philosophy. He's just kind of a polymath who just gets into things. He's got a great outlook on life, and I love talking to him. I loved meeting him. So I hope you love this chat, and also you might pick up some tips on how to live longer if you listen carefully. All right, enjoy this chat with Matt McAlister. Welcome, Matt, to Comedicine. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, happy to be here.
You are, actually, the background might be gone, but you're in a very academic background right now. You are working, doing experiments. I want to hear all about it. But you know what? Usually on Comedicine, I start with what I call the day job, but you're a little bit of a reversey. So I'm actually going to do a reversey, and I'm going to start by talking about your improv background, and then we'll talk about what you're doing now, which is like super, super exciting. So I think you're always an improv performer, but you said you started improv in 2014 with Alchemy Comedy Theater. Can you just tell me a little bit about your introduction to improv and kind of what you've been doing with improv comedy?
Yeah. Well, it kind of came in two phases. I went to Clemson University, so that's where I got my undergrad degrees. And there was an improv troupe there called Mock Turtle Soup, and they called themselves the best and only improv troupe at Clemson, which remains true. And they would put on shows. It was all students. And I'd watch it and always thought, like, that looks like so much fun. But I didn't know. I was like, I don't know. I can't just go up there on stage and, like, just do that, right? I'm one of these people that's like, I would like a curriculum, I would like a series of courses that introduce me to this. And if I can understand it, then I think that I would enjoy it. But so I was just a spectator, and I thought, oh, that's fun. And then when I graduated, I'm out in the world. And I realized, like, a lot of these same people have actually started a comedy theater in Greenville. Like the people from this college troupe have started a comedy theater. And so Alchemy Comedy Theater was born out of that same group of people. But this time they had a 101, 201, 301, 401, a whole curriculum. And I thought, well, that's great. I'll jump in. Like, I've always been someone that enjoys at the time I called it like escalating humor, where like, one person says something and you kind of add on in that same vein. And, obviously improvisers call that yes and. But at the time I was just thinking about it, it's like escalation, which actually sounds way too like, dramatic and battle oriented now. But I thought, okay, this will be fun. Just like a, little thing I can do on the side. And I took the 101 class, had a great time, like really, really enjoyed myself. Improv shows are, like if anyone's seen improv, do you have an improv background at all?
I do. I'm mostly a stand-up, but I love doing improv, and I did like when I went. So I love what you said about wanting a curriculum, because I actually went to college for comedy because I'm a nerd, Matt. And I was like, well, I want to take classes. So I have taken improv classes, yes, and done improv. So
was your degree comedy? Like just the word comedy?
It's a diploma. But it was a 2-year college program, is comedy, writing, and performance. Yeah, I know people are like, you can go to school for that. I was like, yeah, you can. And I did. Anyway, you were speaking my language when you're like, I need a curriculum.
I like understanding things deeply and then deploying whatever skill it comes out of that understanding, right? So the improv shows sometimes they're really bad, right? Like sometimes you're in a performance and you are like, I am having a terrible time. The audience is having a terrible time. Everyone wants this to be over. And then sometimes it's like the muse, right? Which is normally busy with like real artists. But occasionally the muse will come and visit like an improv show, and everything will work. And it's so beautiful and so amazing, right? Like you're looking at your partner and sometimes you don't even know how it's happened, but you're just in this wonderful thing that you've created together. That happened for my 101 show. And it had no right to happen.
Wow.
It was a complete like fluke, and as a result, I was hooked because I got a taste. And then it was a long time before I was in a scene ever, that good again. But then in 201, I ended up meeting this like wonderful, wonderful group of people. And they became like some of my best friends in Greenville for years.
Wow.
And we were all like roughly around the same age. And just like ended up really gelling incredibly well. And so we went to, through like 201, 301, 401, all the classes together. And then we ended up like doing a team together. And that was HAL, H-A-L, that like the computer HAL 9000. And that's the team that Dustin ended up being on as well. So yeah, that was my like kind of introduction to it, that I just thought it was going to be this, fun little thing that I saw people do in college. But then ended up making like some really deep, meaningful, lasting friendships out of it. And I had such a great time that I started taking on more roles in the theater, right? Like house manager, and became the co-executive producer, became an instructor for 201, became a coach of this team called Monolith, which was a monoscene team where it's like one 20 to 30 minute show all in one location, one set of characters. And so it's kind of like the marathon of improv versus like really quick scenes and that kind of thing. And then helped start a team that was musical improv that Dustin was a part of as well. I'm realizing that people, you and I are talking, but people don't.
We can tell them who Dustin is, because he's always in the credits and stuff. But Dustin is our editor and producer who makes things work. He makes this work. Hey, Dustin, thanks for making things work. Yes, he's our connection to have you on Comedicine. So that's really cool.
So that was kind of my, the overview of my improv. But the deeper I got into it, the more I was surprised by how many touch points it has with life and with making life better and more fun and happier, And something that I kind of found myself saying to a lot of people when they ask about improv and all this is like, it teaches you that better things are usually on the other side of a yes. Most good things are on the other side of a yes. It's easier to say no, but then nothing really happens. And it's just like, okay, say yes and see what happens, right? And there's so many stories that I could tell, but like one of my favorite things that happened in improv was actually when I was coaching the Monolith team. And so every week we would basically, people think like, rehearsing at improv sounds weird, right? What are you doing? But really what you're doing is you're rehearsing, creating things together and trusting each other to co-create those things and then cultivate them and explore them. There's a lot of like failure modes that we bring from life into the stage that no one really wants to see, like arguments. We all have arguments in life, and occasionally arguments can be fun, but usually they're just kind of sad to watch.
Yeah.
It's too close to life, but not in a fun way. So we did this exercise where you'd have two people come up, right? One person starts, and the only instruction was you have to say something that you have wanted to say to someone in your life that like has emotional heft. Something that you have not been able to say to someone, but like kind of like a dead letter or something, like a truth you wish you could deliver, but you're never going to, and you never have. And then the person who's on the receiving end cannot be defensive or fight back whatsoever. You have to fully accept it and just go with it. And so I still remember this scene, right? The one player walks up and she says, "I think you're only with my father for his money." And we all know how this scene would play out in normal life.
Yeah.
"No, I'm not. How could you say
him.
that? I love your father. How dare you?" And blah, blah, blah. And instead, the person on the receiving end just like, yeah, like, you're right, honey. But, your father and I both understand each other. We make each other really happy, and like, it really works for us. And, love takes different shapes. And, this isn't what you would call love, but we're happy, and all of a sudden it's that moment wasn't comedy, but if you're in the audience, you sit forward because you're like, well, what happens now?
Yeah.
Right. And I remember watching that, and it was like the exercise that I had my team do, and I thought, wait, you can do that? Like, in life you could just not be defensive. You could just own it, and all of a sudden you disarm the person who's coming at you, right? And so it's just one of those little moments that I carry with me all the time now, because sometimes people hit you with an accusation that's just true. And, even if it's shaded in a little bit, maybe has a little bit of aggressiveness or something, but it's like, instead of fighting, just like you agree to the part of it that is true, and you just watch the person deflate, like their anger deflate, and then something real and worthwhile can happen. Yeah. And that was nowhere in the brochure, about improv.
This life lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Actually, I just heard Chelsea Handler was on a podcast, and she said she gets more defensive or more mad when someone says something that's true. Or so I can't. I'm kind of paraphrasing, so I hope I'm not misquoting her. But like, it's the truth is what sets you off, right? If someone says something to you that's like, you're just like, that's ridiculous. I'm not like that. That's not true. I'm not with your father for his money. Like, you wouldn't get defensive because you'd just be like, no, I'm not. But if there's like, you feel that even a kernel of truth, you push back. So I think that's really cool. So how did you come up with that exercise?
I don't think I can fully take credit for it. It's like a lot of things in improv. You go to festivals, you attend workshops, and the small tidbits of an idea will enter your brain, and and then you modify from there. But generally, I would create exercises, sometimes inspired directly by like workshops and things I'd attended. I would think about whatever problem we had and how to get around it, and so.
Okay.
A problem of like, these scenes aren't working because we're arguing too much, right? So why don't we just try not arguing and see how that happens, how that works, right? And then sometimes it would be wonderful, and other times it's like, no, it's not really working, and we just try something else. But that was one of those situations, right? Like for a mono scene, you really need to be like very intentional about conflict, because you have like 20 to 30 minutes of just this group of people like in a room. And so another rule that we kind of came up with was like no strangers. Like everyone in the scene, if there's 5 people, they all have to know each other. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And so, because we would have a scene where it's like 3 people are really close, and then somebody walks on and they're like, hey, I got your pizza. And then it's just really hard to figure out why to keep them around. So like,
for 20 minutes.
Why does the pizza guy keep coming back? And then you have to find a way to justify it, and it can just be like absurd, and it undercuts the reality of the scene.
It's pornography at that point. No, I don't.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. You're like, wait a minute, something's going on here. Yeah. You hear the music start playing.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. I've taken this in a bad direction. I love that because I think it's common. I mean, I still am not a very experienced improviser, but it's really common, I think, when you first start doing improv, is you go, it's not even like, I guess you're saying no to your partner, but you just argue. Like, it's just like, I don't know why, but that's often the impulse is to, why are you doing that? Or what, you turn it into an argument. But you're right, to an audience, it's not that interesting. Where can that go? You can storm off.
We all know where it goes.
You can kill the person. I mean, there's only a few places that can go, and it's not, you're right. It's kind of, I never thought about it from the audience perspective too. It's like, they're there to have fun and have this like fun experience. And maybe they just had an argument with someone. Like they don't want to watch that. So I love that other dimension. I actually just had that kind of happen to me. It was a work situation. And someone talked to me in a way I didn't like, and I talked to them, and they were just like, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. Yeah. Pretty short conversation, actually. I was like, okay, next time that happens, what should I do? They're like, yeah, you should call me out and we'll just move on. And I was like, okay. Well, I can't keep going like, you can't talk to me. No one puts baby in the corner. Like, it's over. It's just like, okay. So yeah, it works in life. I would agree. Like if you just own something and go, yeah, sorry.
It's amazing. Like I'm someone that has this like deep need to explain myself. Like in any situation, I think a lot about the decisions that I make. I think a lot about like the products that I buy. I've joked before that I put more thought into the food that I get from my cats than most people do into their marriages. Like who they're going to marry, like I had a whole spreadsheet with like the caloric breakdown, and I'm like, why, we want high protein for cats, but if it's too high, then that could put a risk, for their kidneys.
Yes.
And then looking into that and thinking like, okay, well, it depends on the protein source in terms of which amino acid and and cats in their normal predatory lifestyles would be eating like the skin and like connective tissues. So they'd be getting more glycine, which is an amino acid that's only generally found in those, as opposed to the processed meats, which are higher in methionine. And methionine needs glycine to be balanced. So now I add glycine into the water that I put on top of the cat's dry food. And that's small. Yeah, I do. And there's actually a study in elderly cats, too, showing that it improves their antioxidant defenses, something called glutathione. Wow. And glycine has extended lifespan in mice, which is the model organism, the starting point for most research.
I've never heard anyone, like veterinary, non-veterinary person ever talk to me that much about what they feed their cats. I'm impressed. That's impressive.
And
So you're a deep thinker. That's what I'm learning about. You're a deep thinker. Okay, so your degree's from Clemson. I love this. Just the whole Comedicine thing is about using both parts of your brain and like having an artistic kind of side and a scientific side. So you have a degree in philosophy and a degree in biochemistry. And did you do this at the same time, or did you do one and then the other one? Who does that, Matt?
There's a gap in between, right?
Okay. Okay.
Yep. I did philosophy first, and then I went back and I did biochemistry. So I have 2 undergraduate degrees from the same institution, but separated by some amount of time, which is a weird thing to do. And it was also, Clemson thought it was weird too. I called and I was like, can I get another degree? And they're like, I guess so. We don't have, and it was one of these like, hey, like, John, like, how do we do this? You know? And they're like, we're going to get back to you, right? So a couple hours later, I receive what is literally a glorified Google form. That's like, who are you? What have you been doing for the past couple of years? And like, what degree do you want to pursue? And then they just reactivated my account. And that was it. Cool. It was literally like a super short process, but it turns out they had changed the way that like classes were numbered. They added an extra 0 in between. And so the system got really confused at me and was like, what is all of this, right? And so there was just a lot. There were some funny like downstream things of like being reactivated into your alma mater, but it was remarkably easy, right? I didn't have to retake the SAT, for example. They didn't, ask me about my high school GPA, which I had no idea what it was at that point. I'd forgotten entirely, So philosophy and then biochemistry.
So when I went back to Comedy College, I had to give them my high school grades. Like, I graduated from high school in 1990 and I went back to comedy school in 2021.
Wow.
And I also had to ask for an accommodation because I didn't want to take I didn't want to take the electives because I had like a doctor of veterinary medicine and a graduate degree in veterinary medicine. And I had been faculty at university and had written a book. And I was like, I don't really want to take the how to write as a professional. Like,
you're like, I've done it.
Yeah, and I was like, here's all the articles I published. But so it was a whole thing like that. It was actually a lot more work than you going back to Clemson. They were like we don't know what to do with you like this. But it's kind of the same thing. Like no one who does that, right? So, but that is wonderful. Okay, so when you were at Alchemy, was that your primary job, or did you have another career or job at the time, or were you like focused on only improv?
No, improv was definitely a side thing. It was in the roles that I played outside of performer. Like there was a nominal stipend associated with it as a sort of like gesture of goodwill, But fair. But this was not something I was doing for the money.
Okay. Like most improv performers, yeah.
Yeah, and I think actually that's something that's worth mentioning, that part of what was unique about the improv scene in Greenville, South Carolina, where Alchemy is that for the most part, people who are doing it are not trying to make it big, right? Like if you go to improv in one of the bigger cities, like the scene there's a lot of people who are really trying to be noticed, trying to make that their life, or trying to, sort of leverage that into something else. And like, that's a wonderful thing to do. But like when you have a community of people that are trying to do that versus a community of working professionals that do this for fun, it does create a different vibe, right?
Yeah.
And I will say there are people in Alchemy that have gone on, right? That moved to New York and moved to Chicago and, pursued comedy and doing interesting things. But I would say for the most part, people there are like happy with their jobs, have a stable income, and really just enjoy being able to jump into something like very creative, imaginative, something that like it requires different things of your brain than daily life. It's more like a waking, controlled dream that you have with someone else, And so, I worked in the like sustainability residential construction space. I was a project coordinator. My role was to basically help make houses more efficient and help them like use resources more efficiently and be cheaper to keep comfortable. And then also, because I don't really have a temper, I ended up being the person that people would send difficult customers to. Because I would just listen, hear them, and then like once they got it out of their system, then we could have a productive conversation. So
I
using
think
some of
that's
those improv skills.
I was going to say, like, that's an improv skill, right? Like letting someone be heard, not arguing back and not being defensive and just kind of going, yeah, so what you're saying is whatever they're saying. Yeah. I sometimes have that skill and sometimes I don't, I will admit. Yeah.
And I mean, none of us are perfect, right? There's always something that can get under anyone's skin, right? Even if you have a sort of monkish calm, right? But the thing about it that I really like is that it's taking the yes and really, really seriously. And this is also something, one of the other life lessons is like in a scene, someone says something to you, they establish some aspect of the reality, where you are, who you are, what's going on or whatever. Of course you agree to it because you're creating something for fun together, right? But in life, someone says something that's kind of bonkers and you think maybe problematic for the world or for the country or for their health or whatever it is, the kind of surface level interpretation is like, well, just say yes and build on that. And like, that's no. Like, you can't just say yes to nonsense. Like when people say things that are incorrect, we learn from each other, right? Like, I'm wrong about things. I don't know what they are, but I would like to find out what those are, right? But so when someone says something, bonkers, right? They think the moon doesn't exist. I don't know. Not just that they think the moon landing was fake, but they think the moon doesn't exist. What do you do? And so to me, the way yes and works in those scenarios is you've just got to dig down to find something you can agree on, right? Like there is something deep down enough that you can agree to, right? And so in that scenario, the I don't know, which is hopefully there are very few conspiracy theorists that just think there is no moon, right? Like, I hear you. I also think about what things that seem obvious might be false, right? Because you look back through history and there's all sorts of things that people thought were true that ended up being wrong, right? Aristotle was one of the cleverest chaps that's ever been, but he thought the brain was a radiator to cool blood. He was working on different information. It was a long time ago, right? Like, this idea that someone has about the moon not being real, it's like, it's deep down, there's just a question of like, maybe what we think is true really isn't, right? And I can agree with that. And then maybe have a productive conversation about like, and then pose the question back on them. So like, how do you do it, right? How do you sort through, like, when you hear something, what's your process for sort of evaluating whether it's true or whether it's false? And now maybe something interesting can come of the conversation as opposed to being like, I'm sorry, what? You think there's no moon, which is like the impulse.
You're just making me think about like an improv Facebook warrior Facebook warriors who go on and just argue with people, but like be like the good, like the yes and Facebook warrior who just goes on and like finds something to agree with and tries to find common ground. Like, maybe Facebook would be better if someone would do that. I don't know. It's just making me laugh, even just the thought of it. Like going on people that you
warrior.
Absolutely don't agree with. The yes and warrior. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's very, very interesting. Yeah.
It's not always the easiest thing to do, but I think probably a more realistic example is like when someone, there's a lot of touchy topics around like what parents do or don't do with their children, right? Whether that's like very specific nutrition, like my kid can never eat, Red Lake 20, or like things around vaccination and other topics that like are just really hard to talk about with people because people have like very, very strong opinions. And in coming from a scientist's perspective, when I start like sort of pulling the thread on those, I often find that they're based on a lot of misconceptions. And so I would love to help remove some of those misconceptions, but it's a very touchy and tricky thing to try and navigate, right? Because there's just a lot of like landmines all around these conversations. And a lot of times, for whatever reason, people will build their identity around, I'm a parent that doesn't this or does this, And so like, the yes and moment there is like agreeing with finding that like what they really value is trying to do right by their kid.
Right.
And it's like, I don't have kids, but like I can totally understand that. And we can have a conversation about that. And, that has a much better chance of something good happening as opposed to a really frustrating conversation that you walk away from. And worst case scenario, you've damaged the relationship and done nothing good for each other. So.
Yeah, I think veterinarians struggle with the raw food because people just get really passionate about that. And also, like, talking about dogs, less than cats, but people do feed cats raw food, but like, they like it. they like eating poo too. Like, but like they like it. And then owners are like, well, they like it. They like it. They look good. And like, I used to try to like, okay, you shouldn't do that. And then, but now I'm just like, they like it. They look good. I'm just like, okay, if that makes you happy, just do it. It's wrong. But you know what? I don't say that though. I just kind of, okay, here's some information. But you're right. It's coming from the place of they love their dog and they don't trust some of the things in the dog food and the processed meat, and they want to do the best for their dog. And that's beautiful, right? That's amazing. But some people are a little misinformed. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we all are to some extent, right? Like
yes.
There was this TED Talk I watched like 10 years ago now, where she starts off, I wish I could remember her name, so sorry to her, but she's like, she asked the audience, what does it feel like to be wrong? And I'll ask you, what does it feel like to be wrong?
I'm trying to think the last time I was wrong, which is not like, it's not hard. I'm just trying to think something that I was like, oh, I didn't know that, or I was really wrong. I think I feel a bit bad, especially like it depends how wrong. And then, but sometimes I'm like, oh, like I want to read more about it. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Is that, yeah, it depends on the thing. I sometimes have to apologize if I was like off base, I guess. I feel a bit bad when I'm wrong. There you go. A little bit bad.
Yeah. My answer was very similar, right?
Yeah.
Just in terms of what it feels like. And as was like the audience that this speaker asked. But then she's like, actually, you're wrong, because what you just described was the feeling of what it feels like to realize you're wrong. What it feels like to be wrong is exactly what it feels like to be right.
Oh my goodness.
You just don't know.
Yeah.
And I that's another one of these little tidbits that I just carry with me, right? That there's, if you think about a network of beliefs, right? Some of our beliefs are really elaborated. We thought about them. We intentionally hold them for a variety of reasons. But we have all these beliefs in there, right? And I want to have conversations with people about things to help. We can mutually help each other to realize what's wrong and what's true in our belief networks. And obviously, there are a lot of things that are opinions. There are a lot of things that are different ways of viewing the world. And I'll briefly give a shout out to my favorite analogy on this, that going back to my philosophy degree, which is that like basic distinction between things that are subjective, that are true about you, and things that are objective, they're true about the world, regardless of what anyone thinks about it. And when people talk about their personal philosophies or their beliefs on life, sometimes people take this view of like, it's a free country. I'm free to have my own opinion. I can believe whatever I want. And that might be true politically, but it doesn't really hold up philosophically. And the analogy that I like to use for this is that the philosophy is like architecture, because if you're going to build a home, you have to obey the laws of physics or that home will collapse.
Right.
And it doesn't matter what culture you're in or what time period you're in. If you build a house and you don't obey the laws of physics, it will collapse, right? So there are certain elements of a life philosophy that have to map onto reality, or it's just not going to work. And those are the big capital T true, and false things. But outside of that, you think about how different architecture is from one country to another and from one time period to another. And all of those are viable ways of building a house, and they just have like a different kind of approach to things. And then even within the same culture, like you and I probably decorate our homes differently, right? And there's nothing incompatible about that. And I think philosophy and the life philosophy you have is the same way, that there are certain things that we should argue about because there really is only one true answer to certain things. But outside of that, there's a lot of things that it's just, well, that's your way of inhabiting the world, right? And there's nothing incompatible about that. You're going to have a lot of people coexisting that inhabit the world differently, but we do all have to agree on certain things or the house falls down. So that's the way I like to think about disagreement and agreement in philosophy.
Yeah, I like it. I like it very much. I want to thank our Season 6 title sponsor, Covet. Covet is an AI co-pilot for veterinary professionals, and I'm excited to talk to you about it because this is the AI co-pilot that we're using at the hospital where I work. There's so many great uses for this. I get a lot of referrals sent in with a ton of PDFs, and sometimes just like 12 years of the dog's medical record sent to me. 12 years, you guys. I don't have time to read through all of that. Sometimes my records are sent to me in French. That's challenging for me. That's okay. Covet can deal with it. It takes everything, turns it into a nice summarized document so I can review everything before I go in the exam room. And then once I'm in the exam room, Covet can listen to the entire consultation. I can talk about my physical exam findings. I can talk to the client. We can make a plan together. all of this gets summarized better and faster, honestly, than what I can do myself. And there's a lot of cool features in the app. One of them is you can call a client from the app directly. It will listen to both sides of a conversation, and then it will summarize the whole thing. Again, better and faster than I can. This has literally saved me hours every day getting my paperwork done, getting me out in time, and also just decreasing my general stress level because I'm not worried, oh, did I get that all? Did I get the right leg? Did I get everything recorded? Am I going to forget something? And it's a lot nicer to focus on your patient and focus on your client rather than having to constantly be turning away from them and writing stuff down. So check out Covet. It is fabulous. I want to thank them for everything they do to support the veterinary profession and also for supporting this podcast. Okay, I'm going to fast forward. So you were with Alchemy for 7 years, and then you moved to Texas. And was that to start your PhD?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And now you're currently a PhD in Biomedical Sciences, and you're studying aging and longevity. Okay.
Yeah, and I usually like to say aging and longevity because I feel like if I just say aging, people think that I said Asian. And they're like, you're studying what, Asian history or, and just, yeah, it's just like your just comedy degree,
Right. Yeah. It needs some explanation about what that is. Okay. Well, I mean, that's a huge topic. That's why I saved it till the end. Well, not the end, the mid, wherever we are, because I think there's just so much there. Okay. So first of all, why study aging and longevity? And first of all, what is it? What is the field? And then why are you studying it?
So the field is, there's different ways of cutting up topics, right? So within the sciences, you could think about biology and chemistry, and then you could zoom into different aspects of biology like biochemistry, structural biology, genetics, and so on, right? And these are kind of domains of knowledge. When we talk about a field like aging and longevity, it's sort of like very similar to talking about cancer research as a field, right?
Okay.
That the field is really organized around a particular biological phenomenon that we are trying to understand and then do something about, right? Like no one studies, at least no one that I'm aware of, studies cancer because they just, dare to know, dare to understand, right? We study cancer because we want to understand it so that we can get rid of it. And aging has a similar flavor that for the most part, people don't like getting older. We don't like at least the things that happen in terms of our senses deadening, our memory starting to slip, more aches and pains, and the increased risk for essentially every disease, right? That comes with age. And so the people have been talking about the fountain of youth, and people have been trying to figure out solutions to aging for probably about as long as humans have been around. And it wasn't until quite recently, really like the 1990s, where we had some of the first pieces of evidence that aging was something that can be modified, that you can make a change in an organism, or you can change something about that an organism's environment and increase its lifespan. I said the 1990s, but the first experiment that proved that was the 1930s. It was an experiment where they accidentally fasted mice. It was a form of calorie restriction that basically 70% of what they were supposed to be eating is what they were receiving. And they inadvertently realized that it made these mice live longer. That something about being at a calorie deficit for the mice resulted in their lifespan being longer. And it activated a series of what we now know to be genetic programs that are associated more with broadly, repair and regeneration. That it's having less calories is like a signal from the environment that the body receives, and that it's like, okay, things are rough out there. You really need to hunker down. And so there's programs in our body. There's one that's called autophagy, and it just means self-eating. When there aren't enough calories around, there's not enough building blocks for a cell to do what it needs to do. It says, well, I got to start breaking down some of what I don't need, break down the garbage, and turn it into raw materials again that I can use to do the things that I need to do in order to survive. And the benefit of that is you break down kind of useless stuff in the cell that accumulates over time. And some of these are protein aggregates. And protein aggregates can be things like people may have heard about this with Alzheimer's disease, right? That there are these kind of tangles and these bunches of things that are at least associated with brains that have Alzheimer's disease. And so, I jump forward to the 90s, we start to have genetic tools to understand what's going on. Jump into the 2000s, the human genome's been sequenced, and we start having more and more understanding of the different factors. And 2013 was a big moment for the aging field. It was the release of this paper called The Hallmarks of Aging. And it's this nice kind of wheel graphic where you have a number of different hallmarks that each contribute in their way to this phenomenon that we call aging. And it was a important moment for the field because prior to that, a lot of the energy of the field had been taken up by people arguing about what it really was. Aging is the accumulation of mutations. No, aging is it's the breakdown of these like protein quality control networks. And then someone else says, no, it's the fact that your mitochondria get much worse with age, right? And so all these arguments were happening that would take up a lot of energy in the field. And so this paper says, you know what, it's everything. It's all of it.
Yeah, it's yes and, right? It's yes and.
Yeah. Yeah. And over the last 10 years or so, there have been a number of, it's a little bit longer than 10 years, but we'll put it at 10 years. There have been a number of interesting papers published that have shown substantial lifespan extension in mice. And you have to take that with, the proverbial grain of salt that we are not mice, right? Mice are not just small people. Things that work in mice don't necessarily work in humans. But it's a really important signal because you have to start somewhere, right? Yeah. You can't just try something with humans and see what happens, right? It's a funnel of start with something that's easier and more manageable, which are mice. So a lot of very exciting things are happening now in the field. A lot of different types of interventions that have a genuine possibility to move the needle to help us live like healthier, longer lives.
All right. Well, that is cool. I mean, do you know who Dr. Nicole Earhart is at Colorado State University?
Not off the top of my head.
No, okay, no, that's okay. I just wondered because she was my mentor when I did my surgical oncology fellowship. But so she studies cancer, but she's kind of moved into the aging field. So she's the director of the Center for Aging at CSU. So I've heard her speak on aging, and it's like her veterinary background really comes in because her cancer background and her veterinary background, because a lot of the hallmarks of aging are also
modeled after the hallmarks of cancer.
Yeah, and then like dogs are a better model in some ways because they live with us. They're genetically diverse, but they don't live as long as us. So they're in our environments. They're in our beds. They're sometimes eating the same foods, or they're right. A little different than mice. Like maybe a slightly better model. So that's kind of how she's kind of moved into that. So I've learned some of the stuff about just from listening to her speak. I've heard her at a couple conferences speaking, which is pretty amazing. So you're talking about living longer, but in that field, I've also heard about not living longer, just they call it your health span. I don't know if you could speak a little bit to that, like your health span versus your lifespan.
Yeah, so the health span we needed a term to describe the healthy years of life. Because if you just say extend lifespan, people imagine the worst decade of your life, right?
Yeah.
Where you're frail and maybe bedbound and you're starting to forget who you are. And someone says, let's extend lifespan. And what people hear is, let's just extend that.
Yeah.
And there's a comedian who I have no idea what his name is. So again, I'm so sorry. But he told a joke about this. He's like, basically, that's like someone gives you a slice of pizza and then just keeps giving you more and more crust. We don't want more crust. We want just a larger pizza slice. So when I think about extending lifespan without health span, I think about just adding more crust to the pizza.
Yeah.
And somebody out there likes crust enough where they would want that. But health span is what we really want. And it's when you think about people who have like perfectly, or at least close to it, maximized their lifestyle, right? Like, these are the people that eat really well and they manage their sleep and they exercise and they're mid-70s and they're still running and working out and they're still vibrant. Those are the people that have done a great job managing and maximizing their health span. So when we talk about extending lifespan, I generally say healthy lifespan in case people haven't heard the term health span. But one thing that I like to point out is that healthy people don't just fall over and die. So if you extend health span, in most cases, you will also be extending lifespan. It's not entirely true because let's say you extend health span out to 115. At that point, at 115, 120, 125, you start running into some structural problems, likely, in human biology. Like some of the proteins that we have, collagen and elastin, the structural proteins that are our body, they break down over time, and there aren't mechanisms for regenerating them. Unlike cells and skin and all of our tissues, these are things that it's one of the few places where, at least as far as I understand it, the wear and tear phenomenon is true. That doesn't mean there aren't interventions that we can come up with to fix them. There are people working on this. Anything that can be made in biology can be remade or repaired. It just requires a lot of intelligence to figure out how to do it, to repair the damage, remove it, restore the function. But just thinking about maximizing health span without some of these next stage or next level interventions, there probably is an upper limit that was probably around 125 years, based on the fact that no one's, as far as we know, has lived longer than that.
Okay. Yeah. That's a long time. Like, I don't know if I want to live that long. Do you want to live to be 125, Matt?
So long as I've got my health, yeah. It's just, it's just saying yes, Okay,
that's fair. But you could also say yes to dying, and because we don't know what happens when we die.
Yeah.
It could be it could be cool. I don't know. We don't know. We have no idea. Okay. Specifically, what are you studying? Like, you're doing a PhD. As much, I know it's hard to say your whole PhD, but what in this whole field, what area are you kind of focusing on right now?
Yeah, so my project is focused primarily around something called epigenetics. The metaphor, I think we'll go with this one. So every cell in your body has essentially the same genome. And you can think about that like the library, right? It's one library for every cell in your body. But obviously, if you think about like a brain cell versus a skin cell versus a heart cell, they're doing very different things. They look different under the microscope. So how is it that they're doing that given that they have the same library? And that's where the epigenome comes in. Which books are checked out of the library?
Okay.
And so a brain cell checks out different books than a heart cell, than a skin cell. And epigenetics is a layer of information that manages that mediates which books can get checked out and which ones can't, and when and how often and that kind of thing. Over time, that organization drifts. It gets messier. As cells divide, they have to replicate their genome, but then the whole library, but then they also have to replicate this complex set of instructions as to which books can be checked out and which ones can't. And so sometimes what you find is that aged cells will check out the wrong book. And now you have a liver cell that's expressing a neurotransmitter for some reason, right? And so you get this kind of breakdown in cell identity, this one aspect of aging. And so my project looks at a technology, we'll call it, that won the Nobel Prize back in 2006. Shinya Yamanaka discovered they're called transcription factors, but that's just a specific type of gene product. And it's 4 transcription factors that if you express them in a cell like a skin cell, they will become a stem cell. So it's a cheat code where you express these factors and you can generate a stem cell. And that was super cool. People were really hype about it, and they still are. It was a very well-earned Nobel Prize. But what people in the aging field realize is that in this process, if you take a 70-year-old skin cell and you turn it to a stem cell, then that stem cell is now 0 years old. It also reverts the age. And so this process of becoming pluripotent, becoming a stem cell, is also age reversal. And what's really cool in the way that I think about this, we have a program inside of us, humans do, for taking 2 old cells, which are adult cells, and then making them perfectly new and generating a baby. We know that that it's there, right? During embryogenesis, during this process, the early phases of a human being, 2 people who are 40 years old can have a perfectly young baby. There's more complications in the delivery, but so long as everything goes well, it's not as if the baby comes out 10 years older than a 30-year-old couple, right? And so this process of rejuvenation, this built-in process of taking 2 old cells and making a brand new one, is what my project is exploiting. basically trying to figure out, can we tap into some of this rejuvenation in adult normal tissue? And the challenge is that if you go too far, it's bad news.
Cancer. No, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It's, or at least a tumor, something called a teratoma, which is a terrible tumor. It's like a tumor with teeth and hair. It's the worst, right?
We are excited if we ever get those in vet med because they're really rare.
Yeah.
But no, they're gross. They're gross.
Yeah. Horrible.
Okay. We don't want that.
No, we don't. So it's the fountain of youth and also like a ticket to hell at the same time.
This is like the wrong amount. You're like, oh no, it's the unborn twin on your neck. Okay.
like Mad Max.
Okay. That was from Big Fat Greek Wedding. I don't know if you remember. It was like a very old movie, very funny. And this old Greek woman's talking about her teratoma.
Oh, God.
And she goes, "It's my unborn twin." And she was like, "There's teeth and hair," but it was a teratoma she was talking about.
Yikes.
Okay. Well, that is really cool. You talked a little bit about lifestyle factors, and I don't know how much I'm assuming you know a lot about this. I just remember from when I heard Dr. Earhart talk, some of the studies she talked about were like everyone wants the fountain of youth, but it was like, if you don't smoke, if you get 8 hours of sleep a night, if you exercise, if you have some calorie restriction. I actually sort of took it more as just don't eat everything, whatever you would call that. Like, don't eat too much. There's probably one I'm missing. Stress, I guess, would be a big one. Not drinking too much. I think those were like the things. And like, if you did do those things, those people had a better health span. And so I think I was watching that and I was kind of getting frustrated because I was like, we know how to, we know a lot of information about how to do this, and they're looking for a pill. I just want to know if you could speak to that. I love what you're doing. It's really, really cool. But I also think, how far can we take this just by modifying our lifestyle, or in your opinion?
We can take it pretty far. And kind of like what I was saying earlier, of that if you really, really did everything perfect in terms of your lifestyle, you might, if you have great genetics, you might be able to make it to 115. And if you have extremely rare genetics, maybe 120. I mean, people have done it. And in many cases, those people were not particularly healthy. They really, really won the lottery in terms of the genes that they have. And there are people that study those people to understand what's going on. Like, what are their bodies better at doing that most of us aren't? Like, why don't they succumb to all the sort of things that most people do in their 70s, 80s, and 90s? Like, why are they still ticking, right? But I try to have as close to an optimal lifestyle as reasonable, but I'm also someone that enjoys a really nice meal. I enjoy a good bottle of wine. I have a sweet tooth, but I try to keep it in proportion. There's certainly things that I could do more of or do less of, but all of the health factors, all of the lifestyle factors none of them are that surprising.
Yeah.
Right? People can argue about what the best diet is. I follow the large published evidence on that. But, we'll just say, if you have a good diet, maintain a healthy weight, if you exercise regularly, a combination of cardiovascular and resistance training, with diet and with exercise, obviously, they're more scientific, specific constellations within that. It's not just like, go exercise.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
So there are better and worse things that you can do in that. But still, it's not surprising that exercise and diet are in there. And then sleep as well. Giving yourself at least the 8-hour opportunity. If your body doesn't take it, what can you do? Just get up and go on with your day, right? But you at least give yourself the opportunity for those 8 hours. That gets you a long way. And in many cases, a lot of the beneficial interventions, whether those are like small molecules, repurposed drugs, supplements, whatever it is, doing the sauna, red light therapy, which there is evidence for in terms of improving the quality of your skin through increasing production of collagen. There's actually a split face trial on that was really good. Yeah, where they, same patient received real light on one side, real red light, and then fake red light on the other. And then they could take skin biopsies from both sides and saw the difference. That was the study that convinced me that there was at least something there.
Okay, because I've always wanted to know that. It's like very trendy, right? The red light therapy. But I've always been like, I don't know, it looks weird, that bunny mask, but okay. All right.
And it's not gonna make you stop aging, right?
Yes.
But it's one factor among many that you're helping support the processes in your body that degrade or decline over time, right? But in all of these, in a lot of these cases, if you're not doing the centerpieces in terms of like diet, exercise, and lifestyle, diet, exercise, and sleep, the trifecta of lifestyle, then a lot of these other interventions like don't really have like a foundation to work on.
Right. Like you got a red light mask on, but you're smoking through it.
Yeah.
That's probably not going to work well for you.
And if you're not sleeping, then like a large number of genes that are associated with DNA repair are upregulated. They're under circadian control, which is to say that they're upregulated at night. And it kind of makes sense. Like when your body is immobile for the most part, and that's when the body says, okay, let's do some repair. Let's, you don't fix a highway in the middle of the day because that's when all the cars are going. You do the repair in the middle of the night. And so a lot of the positive interventions, like it's almost as if they're relying in certain ways on these factors being in place. Now, and it's not to say that you wouldn't get a benefit in the absence of some of these. That that's certainly going to be the case with the interventions that are coming out probably in the next 10 years. Where they're like, because you think about, there are 20-year-olds that don't exercise and they're perfectly healthy. They're like, they could be in better shape, of course. Right. But if you compare their clinical biomarkers to someone who is 60 and is a lifelong exerciser, in most cases, the 20-year-old's still going to win. Yeah. Just because their body is in a better condition. And, for the 50 or 60-year-old, they were 20 once. Their body knew how to do it that way back then. It just has drifted, right? So you get back to that point, restore the function that was lost, repair the damage that is accumulated, and at that point, it matters less that you exercise. You're still going to be healthier and you're still going to feel better, but it won't matter as much as it does. Right now, it's like that's the only real validated path that we have. Yeah.
Okay. So, all right, I want to talk about saunas. What do you know? I'm very interested in this.
Yeah, most of the data comes out of, I want to say, Finland.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, there might be some also from Norway, but it comes out of a country where sauna bathing is much more common, right? It's a social practice. So there's a couple of studies that looked at a relatively large number of people and were able to do a dose comparison, looking at people that use the sauna for maybe once or twice a week versus 3, 4, 5 times a week, and then tracked them, or at least looked at outcomes over time. I would have to look back to the study to remember the exact methodology. But the output of this was that for people that use the sauna, like 4 or 5 times a week, the risk of cardiovascular disease and Alzheimer's disease was substantially lower. My memory, at least, is around the hazard ratio is like 0.66, which means that like if your chance of having heart disease is 1, just being a normal person, if you take sauna now, it's 0.66. So I have a substantial decrease. And if I'm wrong on that, we can take that out.
Okay, we'll go back. We'll go back and look. Well, we'll just say, you know what? It's substantial. It's significant. Decrease. We should be doing the sauna. Okay, all right. I'm getting on top of that in my life. Okay, I just want to know. Well, I don't know. This might not be a fair question. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. But just what I've heard in the aging research community is just about rapamycin as a drug, as it's potentially the drug, or is this what people are going to be taking? Or do you have an opinion about that? Or do you know some of the information about that research?
I know a lot about rapamycin.
Okay.
So rapamycin is the darling of the biohacking aging community, I'll say.
Okay.
Because it is available, right? If you find a physician who is up to date on the literature and is like willing to play ball with you, they can prescribe it off label and then track a couple of blood markers that are important, right, to make sure that the dose is right for you. And that's important because people metabolize this drug differently, which is true of most drugs. But in this case, you really want to dial in a very specific level. You at least don't want to overshoot a specific level.
Okay.
And so, for some people, that might take 5 days to get the drug out of their system, and another person might take 14 days. And so it's important to know those kind of details. But the way rapamycin works is it's like a fellow traveler with fasting. So we were talking earlier about how calorie restriction and fasting acts as a signal to the body that activates some of these endogenous or built-in programs for, we'll say, regeneration and repair. what rapamycin does is it inhibits this enzyme called mTOR. And it's funny because like mTOR just means like mammalian target of rapamycin. So
I didn't know that.
The drug was discovered first. And then the thing that it was inhibiting, they didn't know what it was, but they just said, okay, it's thing that's inhibiting is the target of rapamycin. So mTOR.
Amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah. But what we understand now is it's basically an amino acid sensor. And amino acids are the constituents of protein, right? Every time you eat protein, it's built of amino acids. And we ourselves are built of amino acids. So when amino acids are present, then the body, that's a signal to the body that, okay, this is great. This is like an anabolic, right? A pro-growth time. Like we've got food, we've got calories, we've got amino acids we can build. It's a signal that there's food and like calories present. And so when mTOR is activated, it actually suppresses autophagy, which is that opposite process I mentioned earlier, where the body says, we don't have food, we need to clean up the house and see if we can break things down for raw materials. So the neat thing about rapamycin is that it inhibits this enzyme, or the mTOR, even when you're fed. So you don't have to fast in order to reap these benefits. But the effect that it has is specific to mTOR and has extended lifespan in mice significantly, above 25%, close to 30% lifespan extension in mice. It's the current gold standard. It's the best that we've seen on a large scale, where the research is done by what's called the ITP. It's the Interventions Testing Program, where they do these massive mouse studies in order to validate lifespan extending compounds. Also the same group that showed that glycine extends lifespan, by the way, to bring that back. Okay. But rapamycin is, the way that it inhibits mTOR is a little bit messy. There's two different complexes of mTOR, and under certain dose regimes, I don't think that's the right word. Under certain dosing schedules, rapamycin can inhibit the second complex, which you don't really want it to. And if it does, then that will increase. It can cause hyperglycemia, which is just high blood sugar. It can cause like your cholesterol, your LDL to increase, and it can have a number of effects that you don't really want, right? That are not in line. But that's like a longer term dose that has that effect. It just has to be high enough to pass a threshold, and it has to be around long enough, generally speaking. And there are, as in everything with science and biology, there are always exceptions. But in general, that's the case. The dosing strategy that most people that are doing this off-label have settled on is either once a week or once every 2 weeks. Okay. And the dose is different depending on your body weight. So men generally take higher doses. And the reason for that is because the drug has a very, very long half-life. So it can be around for a week or longer in you. And so you don't need to take it that often. But yeah, I think there's a good chance that rapamycin will extend lifespan and is extending lifespan in the people who are taking it now. But we don't know that yet. We have, N of 1 data, right? Like the individuals who are trying this for themselves that can report back on improvements to clinical biomarkers, improvements on biological age tests, which are just tests that try to quantify what your intrinsic age is as opposed to your chronological age. So there's a lot of positive signals there, but I think that it's really a first generation molecule. I think that we will come up with, and people are already working on better versions of mTOR inhibitors that don't have the downside of inhibiting this second complex that does beneficial things. I think that it will likely enter into some better improved version of it. Will probably enter into the normal realm of drugs that people take. That's my prediction. But a 30% lifespan extension is significant. Yeah. That would, if you were going to live to 100, that's 130, right? But that's not 150. That's not 200. That's not 250. It's just sort of slowing things down. So there's a lot of other modalities of aging interventions that people are working on. So the epigenetic layer that I was mentioning earlier, like my project where it's trying to repurpose this built-in program for rejuvenation that's used whenever people have babies. Like that's one avenue. There's these things called senolytics, and you think of the word senile, right? Like that can happen to our cells, and they call it senescence. Oh, okay. That's the term for this. So when a cell kind of reaches the stage where it's no longer really doing its job, it's hanging around. Sometimes people call them zombie cells. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but you have this population of cells that no longer is performing its day job, so it's senile in that way. And it's kind of forgotten who it is, and it's just secreting all these weird immune activating molecules that increase inflammation in the body, and senolytics, like lytic meaning something that is destructive, like senolytics are drug molecules that are designed to target those and get rid of them. And so that's also something that there's been excitement around them for a while. The clinical trials so far have been so-so. There's some positive signals, but nothing, no slam dunks on that yet, because it's a complicated population of cells. Some of them are actually not bad. They just look like they're senile, but they're actually still doing important things. Still doing something.
Oh, yeah. It's it makes me think of old people, or we don't want those cells around anymore. Okay. You've been really generous with your time. I have so many more questions I want to ask you, but I'm not going to, because I know you haven't made it home, and your partner brought you dinner because you got stuck doing an experiment. So I just have 2 more questions.
Sure.
And then we'll let you go home. And I kind of had to modify, because I always ask the same 2 questions at the end of my podcast. But you've kind of left improv behind a little bit, at least for now, as you moved and are doing your PhD. But how do you think being an improv performer has helped you be a scientist? Because you're obviously very much a scientist, but how does improv kind of help you with that?
I think the first and most straightforward way is all of the social aspects of science. I mean, scientists are not known to be particularly, extroverted creatures. And so there can be awkward exchanges, awkward silences, that people are excited about their research, but they don't quite know, maybe how to get started talking about it. And I think that improv helped me develop a lot of skills that make it just incredibly easy to talk to people and to network and to help draw people out. And so when I'm talking about my own research, understanding that the way that comedy works in terms of callbacks and the way that you have a certain kind of beat and rhythm to how you're approaching things, I end up doing that in my presentations, that a small callback and in making sure that things are kind of moving with a rhythm and not just one monotonous presentation of data, right? And I think that's probably the most obvious and most helpful way. It's just that interacting with people, because science is it is a team sport. You're working in a lab, you're collaborating with others, and being able to make people laugh while you're doing experiments together, even when it's 9 p.m. sometimes, I'll be doing when we get off this call. I'll be going to finish the experiment that I couldn't finish before. But for the most part, I don't have late nights. It just happens sometimes, and it's fine, because I'm very interested in the question that I'm trying to answer. Right? It's important, and I think it matters, and so it's okay to have some late nights occasionally. But I think that's probably the main way. I'd like to be able to say something like it helped the way that I think or approach problems. But in terms of the reason why I decided to study aging and all of that, I really owe more of that to my days studying philosophy.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it all kind of interconnects, which is really, I think it's really, really cool. Okay. We're at the last question. Then you can get back to your mice, if it's mice that you're working on tonight. I ask this of everyone. I have been trying to get Ken Jeong to come on my podcast since the beginning, because he is a physician who has transitioned to be a pretty famous comedian. So I ask everyone, you're not talking to me, you're not talking to anyone else, you're just directly speaking to Ken Jeong. Could you please invite him to be a guest on Comedicine?
Okay, so you were doing stand-up, and I heard the story, but I can't remember it exactly. You were doing stand-up, and it was just a normal night for you. And I'm forgetting all their names now. I think it was the director. He was just sitting in the audience.
Is that Judd Apatow?
Judd Apatow. Yeah, that's right. Saw you performing stand-up. And for you, it was just a normal night, right? You're just up there doing your thing. And you didn't know that in the audience was someone that was totally going to change your career. And, I think that the Comedicine podcast might be your next stage, right? You don't know what future Apatow is going to be in the audience listening to this podcast, because it's a different audience than you normally have access to. And this may open up a whole new thing. You were a doctor, and then you were a comedian, and maybe next it's astronaut, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, and you won't know until you come to the show.
And what did you say? Oh, I'm just going to quote you back. Better things are on the other side of yes.
Indeed they are.
All right, that was a great invitation. I loved meeting you. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time, especially when you're having a crazy day with your experiments not going so well. So I'm just going to thank you so much for being a guest on Comedicine. It was great to meet you.
Oh, I've had a great time.
And that wraps up another episode of Comedicine. Thank you so much for listening. It is great having you here. If you have been listening to Comedicine from the beginning, thank you. If you're new to Comedicine, thank you and welcome to our Comedicine community. It is wonderful to have you here. I want to just give a shout out to Mark Edwards, who wrote the music for Comedicine. He's a comedian, an actor, a musician. He's going to be famous, you guys. And then you'll be like, is that the same Mark Edwards? And I'll be like, yeah, he's my friend, you guys. I know him. And he wrote the song. He's amazing. Also, big shout out to Dustin Bays. Thank you for editing the show and producing it. I appreciate you, because I don't know how to do that stuff and I don't want to learn. Yes, it's willful ignorance, I think, at this point, but I'm so glad Dustin is here with me, helping me out with the show. And thank you for being here. If you enjoyed this episode, please like it, share it, do all the things, review it. If you're a sponsor or a potential sponsor, call me. That would be great. If you don't like the show, I don't know why you're still here.